Hello. This session, we will talk about cities' contribution in Korea. A different path. Reynold Teresa explains the concept of subsidiarity in an article titled The Promises and Perils of Subsidiarities in Global Governance. Reynold wrote subsidiarity as subsidiarity can be broadly defined as a default preference for locating governance at the lowest possible level. That is, the level which is closest to the individuals affected by the decisions of the governing body. This approach seems appealing because local actors, due to their proximity, often have greater stakes in addressing a given issues. They enjoy more local legitimacy, and frequently they have in-depth knowledge of the complexities of the situation. While the concept of subsidiarity is useful to support development cooperation between municipalities, how to utilize the subsidiarities can differ. As I mentioned in previous sessions, Rio 1992 and Agenda 21 is one of the seminal moments that championed the role of cities in development cooperation. In Agenda 21, the concept of subsidiarity is enshrined as this. Because so many of the problems and solutions being addressed by Agenda 21 have their roots in local activities, the participation and cooperation of local authorities will be a determining factor in fulfilling these objectives. Local authorities construct, operate, and maintain economic, social, and environmental infrastructure, oversee planning processes, establish local environmental policies and regulations, and assist in implementing national and subnational environmental policies. As the level of governance closest to the people, they play a vital role in educating, mobilizing, and responding to the public to promote sustainable development. Compared to city diplomacy of mature donor in the Western democracy, Busan's development cooperation may give an impression of being less developed or less serious with this concept of subsidiarities. Stubborn habits in international relations often leads to simple application of theories produced with a few cases of northern metropolis to the southern cities. This is because of an assumption that the expansion of theoretical application would enhance understanding of cities in the global south. However, such theoretical universalism may lead to dependence, derivation, and alienation of the South. Yes, the municipal cooperation has been emerging in Korea. Yet, I would say that the differentiating historic experience of state-centrism renders a distinctive municipal diplomacy in Korea. The lack of municipal resources originates not only from its short historic democracy. Rather, the institutional path dependence explains the lack of autonomy in city diplomacy of Busan. Based on the longer-term precondition of being a state since the 5th century, and a successful developmental state as a critical juncture, the state is at the center of financial management of municipal governments. Explaining Korea's state-centric practices, I just explained a concept called developmental state. This is a concept that explains particular type of state with a strong government leadership. And Eileen will briefly explain the concept of it. Eileen, please.
When looking at Korea's development experience, an important concept to talk about is the theory of a developmental state. This concept is based on the idea that promoting industrial growth through structural economic transformation becomes the task of the state. Here, it needs to be understood that besides the structures and roles of a state, its relationship with society and its contributions to development have to be considered. The aim of a developmental state is usually to achieve transformation by increasing innovation, creating productive capacities, and maximizing technological spillover effects. And in order to do so, the state usually nurtures a favorable sector by, for instance, investing in necessary infrastructure, formulating policies, promoting industrial subsidies and public investment programs, and investing in education and R&D that is connected to that sector. Therefore, the developmental state refers to different kinds of active state involvement to develop a certain area. By doing so, usually a growth in exports in that industry, and therefore a positive effect on the overall economic growth, should be seen. However, this can also point out the limits of what the government of a country can do. In the case of South Korea, active state involvement can be observed, for example, in the scope of its government-led industrialization during the 1960s and 1970s, when the state played a crucial role in formulating and establishing related policies. Additionally, the government aimed for export-oriented growth and therefore shifted its production from light industry to heavy and chemical industry. Those strategies were supported, for instance, by active investments in research and development, human capital development, and, as mentioned before, the implementation of favorable policies.
One of the primary roles of a developmental state entails allocation of financial resources based on its national development plans. Having said that, let me introduce a theoretical concept of para-diplomacy. Zerawi, in a chapter of a book titled Understanding Para-Diplomacy, introduces two types of para-diplomacy. As I said earlier, para-diplomacy means a diplomacy practiced by cities and local governments. The two types of para-diplomacy are following. First, positive para-diplomacy. This means regional or urban activities are in line with state foreign policy directions. And as a contrasting concept, there is negative paradiplomacy, meaning municipal diplomacy that is in contrast with state foreign policy direction. Let me give you an example of negative paradiplomacy. In the 1980s, the United States central government did not stop nuclear race. And a number of big cities in the United States defied the state direction in favoring of nuclear race, and they deployed anti-nuclear city diplomacy, making a case of negative paradiplomacy. This negative paradiplomacy is based on cities' calculation that nuclear race is not really working in favor of cities. In Korea, with a strong tradition of centralized state in which municipalities rely mostly on government budget allocation, negative paradiplomacy is relatively rare. But there is an irony here. In contrast to the centralized financial management, the survival of political elites in Busan lies on decentralized municipal elections. Hence, Busan-style ODA is centered heavily on how to benefit Busan and the voters in Busan. Short-term direct gains of the city, such as assisting local enterprises with advancing to markets in neighboring developing countries, and supporting exports and skill sets in Busan, are the claimed goals of municipal international engagement. Busan ODA is mainly targeting neighboring Asian countries, and this regional bias to Asia also tells a similar story. Busan's ambivalent standpoint as a subcontractor of national development program and a city of a municipal election renders the country as an emerging actor in global diplomacy and international development cooperation, which tries to maximize economic benefit for city while abiding by the State Development Cooperation Strategy. The state allocates Busan with what Busan does the best based on a bigger state framework of inclusive development cooperation, which is here knowledge sharing in the film industry. The state-municipal collaboration by the developmental state, which is well explained by Eileen earlier, can be efficient to partner countries. And let me explain how. Busan's city diplomacy is conducted in a coordinated and top-down fashion, shaping its own state-city collaboration backed by a state-centric developmental tradition. While the state ODA fits better for large-scale physical projects, municipalities better understand detailed development challenges on the ground. And this was the concept of subsidiarities. However, although cities and local governments may have sufficient experiences and knowledges in particular industries to share vis-a-vis partner cities, it is not easy for most municipalities to keep sufficient staff specialized in development cooperation as in the state. Additionally, state is better positioned to prevent similar projects from being overlapped. This is very important for aid effectiveness, and this is the harmonization. Hence, when collaborated well, the state-city collaboration can be, in fact, effective for donor countries and partner countries. Southern city like Busan is more effective in delivering peer-to-peer knowledge acquired on the ground, but it lacks funding to offer relative infrastructure and devices. The state-city collaboration can be effective to resolve those challenges. Let me give you another example of good state and city collaboration with a case of Busan again. Busan successfully conducted digital training courses for capacity building in a cultural content industry in Rwanda, and this took place at the ICT Center, which was built by the Korean state government, which was completed a year earlier. In terms of the broader dynamics in international development cooperation, Busan's film aid is breaking the North-South balance. Both aid giving and the production of global film have been the predominantly jobs of the industrialized and mature democracies in the West. The global South is increasingly replacing the North in both fronts. Now, non-Western donors such as Korea have been reshaping the dynamics of international aid industry by offering an alternative financial sources. It may be too early to tell whether cities' contributive diplomacy in Korea is on its upward way to become more like matured and decentralized Western countries, or the Korea is crafting its own way of distinctive city diplomacy. Nonetheless, Busan's city diplomacy is providing a different path of state-municipal collaboration in a development cooperation. Busan's para-diplomacy demonstrates an alternative route of inclusiveness for other current and potential emerging donors in the global South that, like Korea, have relatively shorter histories of liberal democracy. In this session, I explained non-Western style of para-diplomacy with the case of Busan and Korea. Thank you.